The agenda. Looking at approval of the agenda, anything to add? We did some clarifications already on who is presenting on everything, so that was good. If there aren't any additions, I would take an approval of that agenda.
Motion to approve.
Second,
I reached out to both of you, I hope that you got my email, I just wanted to make sure
that staff patron concerns was the,
that was what it was.
absolutely, yep,
Okay. Just to clarify.
absolutely, yep. Second on the approval of the agenda. All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Looking at the minutes. Any questions or comments on last month's minutes? If none, I would entertain a motion for the approval of last month's minutes.
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We have the expenditure report. This is capital.
So Jade was awarded a $50,000 grant for K through 12 books and programming within our library. This was actually a pretty big honor. She was awarded it from the North Dakota Department of Education, and the amount that she was awarded is a direct reflection on how much summer participation we had. So within our programs and within our summer reading program, we were awarded more than I think all the other libraries that had applied because our participation is so high. So that was really nice. Because Jade will be spending that $50,000, she had to spend it before the end of September, so there are a lot of expenditures on this next report. And it might look odd in the financial report because we technically didn't have the budget for it. So there will be some negatives in our book for our budget for books and our operational supplies, which is where we get all of our programming things. So I don't know if those have showed up yet. I don't think they have though.
How will that show up financially, like end of year? Where will we see that?
You'll see it in the profit and loss report. So essentially, where you see the line item budgets in the profit and loss report, when you go over, you'll see some like over 100%.
Right, where will
Yeah.
we see that 50 show up in it as like,
Oh,
you have the money?
yeah. Oh, in the revenue report. So you see library revenues on the last page of the profit and loss. So when we get that revenue, it will show up on the revenue report. Jade has submitted all invoices, so hopefully we will get reimbursed soon.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions or discussion on the expenditure report? Hearing none, I entertain a motion to approve the expenditure report.
So moved.
And a second.
Seconded?
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
I
Motion carries. And then, I know we took a little peek at it in that discussion, but the profit and loss report as well. Any questions or clarifications needed on the profit and loss?
I have a
for Act
quick question as I looked here. I'm sorry, I have a hard time finding the postage line item. Am I just missing it?
It's at the end, library postage under general supplies.
Thank you. General supplies. I'm just wondering what that postage covers.
Our ILLs, so like our interlibrary loans.
Okay. And then also I was wondering, Hoopla, there was a point where I thought it was an annual payment, but it seems to be every month. Is it Hoopla subscription? Okay.
Any other questions on the profit and loss report? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion for the approval.
Motion to approve?
And a second.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion carries. On to our library director's report.
Okay, so I already mentioned a little bit about Jade's grant and how that reflects very well in our library as far as summer reading programming numbers and just participation in general for our events that we held during the summer. I was curious in general, discussing the idea of an expansion, like a kind of like a smaller expansion as opposed to, I know back in 2017, 2018, they had planned a pretty large expansion. So I've been doing kind of research to see where the library is at and where it has been within the past 7 years. So you guys will find circulation statistics from the past 7 years. So I went from 2017 all the way to 2023. You guys can see that 2023 is actually a little bit higher thus far than what it has been for the past 7 years. So I think our circulation is doing really well. I think in general, the library, I also printed out, sorry I didn't include this in your packet, but I printed out our programming numbers up until now. Yep, well, I didn't, yeah, but I didn't email it to you guys in your packets, yeah. So I just gave it to you guys later. But I printed out our programming numbers for 2023, sorry. And they have been great as well. In June and July, we had 126 events total, and all were attended or had participation. So we didn't have any where it was just no-shows. So that's actually very impressive, and that is very impressive for any library, let alone ours with our small town. And then I also just kind of showed you guys a rundown of our usual events like Storytime, Little Tykes Drive-In, Lego Club, Free Family Movie, Tween, Steam, Pokemon Party, Teen, Adult Book, and Craft Club. And just kind of giving you guys an idea of the number of events that we've had so far this year, the average attendance, and then the total attendance. And once again, it's pretty impressive, I would say, for a small town library in general. It's pretty impressive. So we are getting really good attendance at all of our events. Our circulation is doing really well. It's been up for the past 3 months in a row. So hopefully it continues to go up. And our new library cards have increased by 20% from last month. So we've been getting a ton of people coming in to collect new library cards. So I think in general, my staff need some recognition that they're doing their jobs well.
Absolutely.
And that our library is continuing to be used as much as it ever was in the past, if not more. So that's been great.
What was that percentage for the new library cards again?
It increased by 20% for the month of September. It increased.
Thank you.
Just because I have to ask, what was the absolute number? Like the actual number?
I can email it to you guys. I don't know off the top of my head. It was like 160, and then it was 20% lower than that the year before. It was over 100, which was, I thought, fairly impressive for a month. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Are library cards, like, is that required for any of the, like, events or programming?
No, you can, and the programs are open to the public. So essentially anybody, as long as they are either a kid within that age range or they have a kid within that age range, anybody can attend the events. And then, yeah, the adult events, anybody can attend, so.
I'm wondering about this circulation stats, if this includes books that are checked out like an ebook. Also, does circulation stats include DVDs and that type of media as well, board games? Like, is it anything checked out is quote unquote circulation,
Yes, so it includes all of our library materials.
as well as ebooks that they could view online?
Ebooks are done a little bit separately. I was looking at our like Hoopla stats because those are completely separate. And then our Overdrive stats, and those are also both up, but I did not have enough time to create little graphs for them yet. I thought this was just a really good representation of people who were coming into the library and checking out books, so, or checking out things. Other random things. The bookmobile was back in the shop because of its generator. The generator has been fixed. I believe in next year's budget we put in for a new bookmobile. So hopefully we will be able to purchase a new bookmobile next year and then possibly get it by the end of the year or the year after. We're still looking at some of the surrounding counties to contribute funding for that where they can. And it is, I feel like it's definitely needed though.
At the foundation meeting that we had last week, we had talked about the grant that Rita had applied for, but we did not receive. Did you find any more information out about that? I think it was through the city, like
Yeah.
a City Works grant or something.
Yeah.
Did you have a chance to look into what that was, or if there are other grant opportunities for the purchase of a bookmobile?
Can I have you answer that, Linda?
The grant that was the diesel grant that she went for when she was here, when Rita went through it, that was denied but asked for it to be again applied for. So that should have been applied for, I think in August through October, I think it is. So that's the diesel grant. And stuff. So that's what I do know about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you explored any other avenues to see if there are other grants available for a purchase like a bookmobile?
No, but I do remember Marcus saying that he may be able to help me in that realm. Not to put you on the spot, but
Grants.gov.
okay.
But I'm happy to help search
Okay.
as soon as I finish.
Yeah, I know. You have a lot on your plate right now.
17,000
Yes,
things.
yes. But yeah, something to keep in the back of your mind. But yeah, I will definitely explore those avenues and get those out if they need to be out. When. So.
Awesome. Anything else for us?
I think that was all that I have for you guys from your report so far.
Fantastic. Well then, moving along, within our unfinished business, we had talked about taking an opportunity to really dive into Century Code, to come forward with some questions. It was brought up that maybe there was some area that could be misinterpreted or that was concerning to some, and we did find out that we were able to, if there are some questions that we have, submit those to the attorneys general to get a recommendation, an interpretation, is that I think the actual term of that Century Code. So it was my hopes that everyone had a chance to really dive into Century Code and North Dakota State Library law. And I guess I just kind of open that up to conversation, discussion. If anyone has any questions on any of those laws.
I would say my personal issue at hand is that I feel that there is documented proof of we are not truly approving expenditures when you bring them to us each month. So this list of what was spent, sorry, I have so many papers in front of me, apologize. This list here of what was spent, it's already spent. And actually, some of these books in the invoices that were given to us via email are on the library shelf right now in circulation. So my misunderstanding is, how am I rightfully approving those expenditures if the money is already spent? It just seems backwards. The way that North Dakota law reads is that we are legally responsible for the property, which is materials, operations, and services. Century Code says the same thing. So if we are approving after the fact, to me that's not showing responsibility. And I have issues with at least 10 books that were in the invoices that were received in our email. So how do we go about that? If the book is already purchased and there's an issue, it's almost like you're playing, you have to back up, and we should be approving and seeing before the money is spent. I'm not a super businesswoman. I've been a mom for over a decade, but I was raised by a father who was a businessman, and to me, it just seems backwards. I don't know how I could sit in front of someone and say, I am approving with 100% integrity this list here if it's already spent and it's in circulation on the shelf. That's happened in the last 2 months. And so it just seems very sneaky. And if we are held responsible for those things, we need to change. There needs to be a change somewhere. I've really thought about this. I've really tried to find different avenues where we could remedy this. And I think if the librarians built wish lists, their work wouldn't go in vain. They could build lists of what they want, and then we go through those lists with our selection policy and make sure that these books are meeting these specific principles that are serving our community as a whole. To me, I see an influx of stuff that is not necessarily serving our community, and I just have a personal problem moving forward with that from what I read in the selection policy, the bylaws, and the Century Code.
If you don't mind me going to bat next year.
You're fine.
My understanding, and anyone can feel free to correct me here if I happen to be wrong, which happens far too often. But my understanding was that when we get the invoices specifically, or the expenditure report, whichever one would have you, our job isn't necessarily to approve in the literal sense the materials that have already been purchased, like you discussed. Our job is more to approve the document as a whole for outliers or numbers that don't make sense, or that issue we had at the beginning of our respective term here, where we had that 6 million % that we couldn't make sense of. That was that numbers issue. That was just a spreadsheet issue. I was led to believe that that is more what we're doing. We're more crossing T's, dotting I's, as opposed to looking through approving every material specifically, because that is a monumental task, as I'm sure you know now, because it's a lot of materials a month, and I don't think that should go to one person, let alone 5, or if we're lucky, 6 of us. That's still a lot. So I think having that onus be on the board is a bit much, specifically for like, approving every book that comes in, every material that comes in, every board game, DVD, whatever, what have you, for the multitude of things we have. So I was led to believe more specifically that it was more approval in a general sense, that these numbers are correct. These numbers are not leading us into the red, God forbid, or seeing numbers that don't make sense, and to specifically watch for things like, and this is the worst case scenario, of course, looking for things like embezzlement, or numbers that were charged by mistake, or a subscription that was charged when we don't have it anymore, which is something that happens to pretty much everybody. So I think we were trying to, from what I was told, to correct the sort of human error that happens, as opposed to direct approval of the material.
So, I mean, this is probably a good question for the city attorney then, to clarify what our duty there is. And then in 403804 bullet point 3, it's in general powers and duties of the board of directors. And it lists 6 things that we can do. And so how does 403804 bullet point 3 and this question, how does that all work together? Is something I think would be beneficial to have an answer to.
I had also pulled out that exact same point. For those of you that don't have Century Code in front of you right now, that exact one says to control exclusively the expenditures of all monies collected for or contributed to the library fund. And so wanting maybe some clarification on, I was interpreting it as kind of just as Luke was saying, but I guess kind of looking at what that means. Having also looked at, really as a board, we have 3 governing kind of documents. The first of which being Century Code, the second of which being the North Dakota Trustee Manual from the North Dakota State Library, and then our bylaws, which we set and have the ability to update and adjust as needed. And having really taken a dive through that through the North Dakota Public Library Trustee Manual, although it's a pretty extensive, going through library law is pretty extensive too. It's about a 75, 80-page document, but I think within that, it does do some of that clarification. And so in preparation for this meeting, one thing that I was hoping we could do to kind of add to, not board homework, but board homework, as we said, let's first look at this and see if there's any clarification we need. And we can absolutely submit something to the Attorneys General if we need some clarification on 403804 bullet 3. However, I think if we truly take a month to look at that North Dakota Trustee Manual, because that's kind of our next governing document anyway, to see if maybe that would answer. I'm not saying we can't ask or submit a clarification, but I think that document might clarify for us what exactly our role is as a public library trustee. And then within that document, I confirmed with Danny that if we do have questions or need clarification within that, then we would take that to the state library to clear up exactly what our role is. Like I said, I leave that to discussion. Like I said, I think that manual will answer some of our questions, but if we want to move forward with submitting a clarification or request for clarification on that specific bullet point or anything else within Century Code, we absolutely can do that too. But once again, going back to last month, I talked about we're a very new board, we have a new director. I think before we make any really big leaps and bounds, it's important that we fully understand the governing documents that come before things like our bylaws and then our responsibility to update and to review library policy and procedure. To fully understand what it is we're being expected by those governing documents.
I also think that Century Code 403809, 3, 4, 5, and 6 talks specifically about knowing how much money has been expended and for what purpose, the number of library materials on hand, the number of library materials added, withdrawn, or lost, and the number of materials loaned out, the type of library materials contained in the library. Those are all very, very specific things in Century Code. I'm wondering as well, Troy, you mentioned North Dakota Trustee Manual. I need to look at that closer.
Absolutely so.
Is that number one? Do we take Century Code number one? Like, what is the ladder?
I was asking that same question. As far as my knowledge, it is first Century Code, then the North Dakota Trustee Manual, and then our board bylaws.
But my guess is if it's written by the state library, it's already been through legal interpretation, so maybe the trustees manual is where we should start. And then if we have questions, refer to Century Code and ask questions of attorneys.
I would be fine moving forward with that, just because, like you said, some of those things might be clarified. Some of the questions that we're having now, which I agree are important questions to ask, might be better clarified within that manual. And then from there, maybe we have the discussion. If there are still questions or concerns, maybe then we look at, is that a question for the state library or for the attorneys general, if it specifically still have some questions on Century Code.
In 403809 for that, isn't that all contained in our library report we get annually? Isn't that what that's accomplishing? I thought that was why that section is why you have to
Yes,
give us
that-
the
That is
report.
the annual report of Board of Directors, and so those are the requirements for what we must include within that report.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yes,
Yep.
so like the PLS report that I emailed to you guys, it basically said everything from 2022 as far as exactly how many materials were in the collection, what types of materials, how much was checked out, all of that general information, and then a lot of programming information as well.
So we as the board have not received that yet. That would be the previous, it's annually.
I sent it, yes, but it was prior to you guys getting on the board, and so it's usually submitted in April, but I can definitely send you the 2022 report.
Okay, I can look back as well in my email.
Well, no, I didn't, it was sent to the previous board.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, that's
But
what
I
I was
can send
asking.
you, but
Okay.
I can send you the stats for 2022.
Is
Yeah.
that report posted publicly, like on the website or at all, or is that something that normally or could be, or does it need to be? Having just glanced at the report,
I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't care. I can check at NDLA if that's like a thing.
We have a rep from the state library here. I think she might be able to answer that.
The state library posts all of the PLS, so all the numbers for all the libraries in the state on our LibGuides. So we have a public library survey LibGuide, and all of that information is there.
perfect.
Thank you. So it's a PLA or a PLS?
PLS, the Public Library Survey.
Yeah, if you would send that out with the next, documents. I'm sure after this conversation, we'll also want that trustee manual sent out, so we'll just kind of maybe make it we need a motion for that, but if we just kind of, like I said, set the teacher and me calling it board homework, but kind of just have that goal for our next discussion for next month. Are we, any other discussion needed around that? Taking a look at the trustee manual and then coming with questions that could pertain both to the trustee manual and to the Century Code for next month's discussion. Danny, if you wouldn't mind emailing out those documents, and if someone wanted just a printed copy, is that something that the library circulation desk would be willing to do if somebody, one of the board members popped in for that, a physical copy of that manual?
The board members, yeah.
Yeah,
I think
for the
that would
board
be fine,
members.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Perfect. Any other discussion around unfinished business, bullet A? Wonderful. So then bullet B, the volunteer policy. That was drafted up and is included in the packet. So this is just a refresh. We've never had a policy for volunteers in the past. This is a new policy, so there's nothing changed. We've had a chance to look at that, to go over that, and we need a vote and approval to add that to our policy today. So is there any discussion around the Dickinson Area Public Library Volunteer Program Policy?
I have a few questions. Some of the things I wondered as I read through this material is, will volunteers have name tags so that citizens will know they're a volunteer in the library?
I think we can definitely just do volunteer tags.
Okay. And then in number 3, selection of volunteers, it says specific qualifications. They will be selected based upon their qualifications and the needs of the library. While the library appreciates every person who wishes to volunteer at the library, opportunities for voluntary work are limited and not every applicant will be suitable. I was just wondering, like, specific qualifications, what would disqualify someone? I mean, the last bullet point says, the library will not accept services by the courts. So that shows disqualification there, but just wondering, like, if someone wants to come and volunteer in the library, what would disqualify them if they're wanting to do that and they have a background check and they need references and all these things?
Just in general, like whatever program or whatever project that we are needing volunteers for, we want to make sure that we find people who are suitable and that can assist with those projects. So like, for instance, if we are moving around a lot of books in the library, we want to make sure that we have somebody who is physically capable and okay with moving around a lot of books in the library, that kind of thing. So we want to make sure that we have an individual that is okay for the task at hand.
So are there gonna be opportunities for people to serve in different capacity? Like, to me, that's such a tricky thing. If someone wants to serve in our library and they are handicapped or they have, you know, the ability to not carry books, are we gonna find a spot where they can, you know, I feel like there isn't a whole lot of very specific when it just says qualifications. So it can get really tricky in there. It pretty much boils down to, does the librarian feel like they're a fit? Well, you know, I don't know. It's just, like, to me, it just caught me off guard. Like, if I wanted to volunteer at the library and I went in and I did all the things I needed to do and then I didn't get a position, I just think that it's a tricky thing to wonder, like, oh, I didn't meet the qualifications. So what were those qualifications?
And I feel like it would just be like on an person by person basis as far as that thing goes. It's like applying for a job almost, and then like, do you meet the qualifications? Do you not meet the qualifications? And so essentially, that's how it would go. I don't know how much interest we are going to have. I don't know who is going to be offering to volunteer. And right now, what I would like is essentially just some volunteers that we have that are just like almost on the back burner. And I was talking to HR about this, that go through this. And then when we throw certain events like summer reading kickoff, then we can just bring up our list of pre-approved volunteers and be like, hey, can you help us with summer reading kickoff this year? And then it would just be like whoever can come, who's ever's free, and then we would just find jobs for whoever. So that was kind of how I saw it. I kind of based it off of what the city is doing for animal control volunteers right now, which was a suggestion by the city's HR department. And so essentially, how animal control works is it is almost like applying for a job. Like they post a volunteer position, and then you apply for that specific position. I don't know if the library will ever get to that point. We might. I don't know if there's something that we need on a regular basis and that we can't get a position, like a paid position for, then maybe we might get to that point where we want to post a specific position and say like, can you come in 3 days a week and shelve these books or something like that. But right now, I want it out there so we're able to possibly get like a pool of volunteers that we could use for like big projects or events is what I'm leaning towards.
And just to questionably clarify here, as a former library volunteer, even though I don't know if it comes from a decade ago, but as someone who would be very much affected by those qualifications and such, like, thanks for using that example, by the way, I appreciate it. But everyone at the library was very willing to work around any limitations, and I don't think that would change.
No,
Definitely. I would assume anyway. I would hope not. But I have never had any problem bringing up a concern or whatever, and I did jobs that I was physically able to do and didn't have any problem with, because, of course, as a person who is not necessarily as able as some other people, there is some legal risk in there if I was to be injured. So I mean, that's the kind of thing that I was thinking about too, that if we gave someone a job that they were excited for but not necessarily physically able to do, that there would be that inherent risk of injury or something else, whether to themselves or to a patron. It could be anything. So I think some clarification, once this is no longer a draft policy, of course, would probably be a good idea, just in case. But I don't see why it would be any different than any other type of employment. I mean, at my job I have obvious limitations. I mean, they don't have me running kids up and down the stairs, so I don't think that would be a problem if it was brought up, especially by a volunteer specifically, about limitations that they have or limitations the library currently has, whether that's accessibility or availability of certain positions or something like that.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. It just seems like the wording of selection of volunteers is like you would be willing to turn someone away. And I'm wondering why that would be. Like if someone wanted to volunteer in the library, they obviously have an interest. So to find a spot for them, I don't know, it just seemed interesting.
I think in general, that's just more of, especially looking at it from like a legal perspective, like we want to have the ability to be able to select our volunteers. And so, I mean, I don't know of an organization that doesn't have that ability that takes volunteers. So basically, we just want to have that written down in black and white so people know.
So it would really boil down to personal preference of people.
You don't, like, I mean, how would you know that? Like, people can select who they hire. They don't have to hire somebody. They don't even have to hire the most qualified individual.
It's just this part for me is just tricky, if I'm being 100% honest.
It has to be very open-ended for situations like this in a volunteer. It's with any organization, with others I've worked with. So a good example would be, let's say there is 10 people who go in and say, fill this out, do the thing, and say, hey, I want to volunteer. And then they come up with something like, let's say, like right now they're doing those adult classes, like things you missed in high school, didn't have the class, and they're doing these monthly. Well, let's say they needed 3 people to help out with one of them. They wanted 3 volunteers. Well, one of them needs to be able to put the chairs out. So you need somebody physically able to reach all the chairs and get that. So at least one person has to have that capability. And then the next one, well, they're gonna run the computer and help you do stuff for that. So they need tech skills. You can't have someone who's never set up on a computer and used it. So it leaves that open for the selection of the people with the skills available to do what's needed at that time, because you can't write out an 18-page novel to say if it needs computer skills, if you have to reach, if you have to lift. you'd have to list 1,000 things to say everything that could be done. So
Or
this,
you could just say that everybody is welcome.
But if we only needed 3 volunteers, let's
At
say,
least they would still remain on the list. That's just what I'm saying. Like you're saying, to have that open-ended, this reads very much, I need to find the part.
And I don't mean to interrupt you here while you're searching, but I believe that most volunteer organizations, especially the ones I work with, from the library to the Red Cross or whatever, that they do have to adhere to certain policies. It's the same as employment, I believe, where it's
Yeah,
equal opportunity
and
for
like
everybody.
they're gonna have a background check and
Yes.
references. I think this is the part that I have heard for. Every person who wishes to volunteer at the library, opportunities for voluntary work are limited and not every applicant will be suitable. And that's kind of the part that's like, well, keep them on the list, or, you know, like,
Can I propose just in addition?
yeah,
Not every applicant will be suitable for every volunteer position.
sure. Yeah, that just
Perfect.
reads so
So
much
it's not
better,
saying,
you know?
yeah, so that they're not
yeah.
cut out
Yeah,
completely.
totally.
I think that
So where
that
did you
still
add
is.
that?
Yeah, so within that, if we change not every applicant will be suitable and add for every volunteer position. Any other specific areas that we need to discuss before we take a vote on this policy?
And going back to that thing we just discussed, just for my note-taking's clarity's sake, it's understood that just because a volunteer isn't suitable for that position, they would most likely be kept on a roster of some sort where they could be called in. Would that be accurate, you think?
oh yeah, definitely. And then there are some events where we would be able to, like, whoever could volunteer could come and volunteer, and we could find stuff, yeah, that they could help out
So
with.
even if someone isn't necessarily suitable at the time or whatever it
Yeah.
happens to be, they are still higher up on the list than say a new applicant where, oh, this is someone who couldn't lift a box, well, we can consider them for something else because this is what they were interested in.
Yep, definitely.
Absolutely. Any other discussion of the edited proposed volunteer policy? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion for the approval of the edited volunteer program policy.
Motion?
Second,
second.
all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Under new business, the Dickinson Area Public Library Foundation Board just met last week, so Danny had a little update from what they were discussing.
Yeah, so the library carrel that they purchased, it is upstairs next to the copy machine on the north side of the building. And there is a plaque honoring Fern and Keith, who were former members of the foundation board. So that is there for patrons to use when needed. The other library foundation topic that we talked about was Old Fashioned Christmas. So every year the Library Foundation holds a fundraiser at the library called Old Fashioned Christmas. There is a silent auction. There are hors d'oeuvres, wine. Basically, you just kind of hang out. They usually have a live piano player. And so that will be held on December 1st at 6 p.m. in the library. And I think those were the highlights. Can you think of anything else, Drew? Oh, you can get tickets either online or at the library.
Fantastic. And the other order of new business is a discussion around staff and patron concerns. Last month, Board Member Ho discussed possibly having some sort of way to get community feedback. And so we put it on the agenda for today. And so I guess I open that floor to discussion. To kick it off, do we currently have a physical or digital form to collect concerns or just general public comment at the public library?
We don't have anything formal.
Okay.
So then to be that person, it sounds like we need a policy.
I would agree. I know that in the past, under the last library director, she would often come to these meetings with concerns, but typically they were just given verbally, and there was never any way of recording or officially reporting those conversations or concerns. Most of them, correct me if I'm wrong, would just happen through conversation at the library, correct? Since we have no formal policy or procedure right now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it would hurt to have some sort of maybe physical and digital form that can be filled out, but also then could be used when someone is having a conversation with a staff member. Maybe that staff member then could go in and record if it's anything that's needs to be seen or heard. Or a staff member could kind of just record that conversation. These are some of the conversations that are happening at the library that then you, Danny, could review, and then if need be, could be brought to the board as patron concerns. I think that would be, just me sharing my opinion, a great place to start since there's nothing at the moment. Just having, like I said, a physical and a digital location where people can express general comments and concerns,
Okay.
but definitely open to discussion.
I know some of my staff have voiced their desire to maybe voice their own concerns as far as having some sort of a box or a digital form to collect patron concerns. There have been times where they've received threatening, negative information from the public, and I don't know if that would necessarily just encourage that type of behavior or if it would limit that type of behavior, because I guess if we do receive comments from the public, I would want them to be more solution based as opposed to complaining or just airing out grievances or threats or whatever. So I know my staff definitely have that concern in general.
Well, maybe we should look into what other libraries in the state are doing.
That's a good idea.
I mean, let's check. The state librarian could check with
I'm
Fargo,
not the
Bismarck.
state library.
Sorry, our state librarian representative. We could check with Fargo and Bismarck and a few others and see if they have anything like this,
Okay.
or if they've experimented with it. Because I haven't thought about the downside of it, but if this is on the internet.
I think it's a great idea to have physical and digital formal documents, and then to write a policy surrounding that I do think the issues, and it doesn't have to just be negative issues, people could write in positive things as well for our library. I think that's a wonderful thing. I just think our city commission has an opportunity every meeting that they open the floor, and coming from a personal citizen standpoint, I would have appreciated an open floor for the last year, to be able to do my homework and to come and present as a citizen, as a taxpayer, my concerns for my children, for our community. And so I don't feel that it's okay to cross that off the board to open up 5 to 10 minutes every time. There might not be anybody, but the opportunity is there. And it's showing that we're here to serve our community. This is ultimately what the Dickinson Area Public Library is here to do. And for me, the last 3 months, I've sat on this side of the table. And for the 9 months before that, I sat on the other side of the table. And I would have appreciated that as a citizen. So that's why I desired to bring it up, for us to look at it from a community standpoint, to open the floor each month. I don't believe that every comment we're gonna get is negative. There are people that have really positive things to say about events and about other things, but you have to take the good and you have to take the bad, because that's how you grow.
Absolutely.
And yeah. So I think both. I would
Sure.
love to see both
I
if
would
I
be-
were to write the policy.
Right, I would be curious to explore what other, once again, I know I keep going back to we're brand new, but we are brand new, and I feel like every meeting we're learning more about our board and things like that. So I would be curious to explore what other public library boards are doing in addition to the libraries, to see if they're collecting physical data with those comments and concerns, but also then finding out, is it typical of a public library? We're not saying we couldn't be atypical, but is it typical of a public library board or board of trustees to have that open comment? I think personally, once again, I just think the easiest place to start would be having some sort of physical and digital form, and first see what kind of opinions we're, comments and things we're getting, if we're getting the participation, especially while we're digging into those governing documents. Within that manual, which like I said, I've personally glanced over, but not really truly read through, that there might be information in there that I just haven't looked for or haven't seen, in regard to public comment, in regard to how meetings are typically run, some things that, I probably overlooked in the first and second and third time that I've glanced at that document, but not truly dug into it.
Is this something we want to enact before a policy and trial run on something that is essentially a comment box with a form beside it where, here's some suggested things to fill out, and then, 90% of a page it says comments.
I don't think it's a terrible place to start.
What do you think?
I'm okay with that.
Is that, obviously policy would take time, right? But is that something that we could maybe have, staff draft up and send out an email for kind of approval? Would that even need to be, or just have them come up with something and play with it? And then we can reevaluate next month on maybe looking at policy, or when we've had some time to do some homework in looking at what other boards or what other libraries are doing to continue that conversation.
Yeah, I like that idea of, it's not something super complicated with a comment box, it's not a lot, so yeah, I think that would be something to try out, and then we see where that goes and where we wanna go from there.
Sounds good.
So if we move forward, just for everyone's note's sake, with the library staff coming up with some sort of physical and maybe digital way to collect comments, Danny, if you don't mind looking into what other libraries, comparable libraries and their boards are doing in that sense too.
Yep.
Get a little data, a little homework behind it. And then we just add that to our unfinished business for next month to look at maybe when we got things rolling out in the library, what kind of comments we've received once that is ready. And then we can look at some of that data and maybe we move forward then with the policy. I think too, like I said, with our goal of really diving into the black and white of that public library trustee manual, some of this might come up too. I don't know, like I said, I myself have to really dive into that document again, but I think it'll help looking at that before we really move into something further. But I definitely hear you. Definitely hear you. Because that's not policy, we wouldn't necessarily need a vote on that, correct? Okay, just kind of a beginning step to start gathering some information and data behind that.
That sounds good.
Perfect. All right, well, our next regularly scheduled meeting is Wednesday, November 8th.
One more thing, Troy.
What's that?
Did we have any update on library expansion?
Ooh, has the committee met?
No,
since the last meeting?
not at this time. I have to reach out to Joe and see if he has any type of hard numbers that we could maybe
Okay,
look at, so.
Thank you.
perfect. If we want to make sure that that just stays on our unfinished business, so we remember to bring up that committee.
I also had a question about the conference that's happening tomorrow, Thursday, Friday. I don't know the official name
Oh,
for
the
it.
North Dakota Library
I'm sorry.
Association?
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
I didn't know if that was somehow, like, not televised, but
it'll just be streamed or
to be
recorded.
streamed as board members that we could watch that or gather information from that. I feel like it would be a good resource. So I didn't know, and I looked up like to go, and it's in Fargo,
Mhm.
and it costs money.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, as a board member, I wonder if there's I don't know, if there's a streaming somehow or.
I think typically they don't. I can check on that when I get there tomorrow and send you an email. And I can, if nothing else, email you the agenda, so you could just kind of see what the different sessions are about.
Sure.
So.
Okay, thank you.
And who
Yeah.
from the Dickens Area Public Library is attending this year?
Me, Renee, Cindy, and Rachel.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I had put in to go for my day job, but got denied this year. All right, well, 4 o'clock, same place, Wednesday, November 8th, and with that, I would propose, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor say aye.
Aye.
We adjourned. Thank you.